Okay, here we are, just checking in one last time tonight, and really small update actually. So I figured I would show the bench and not look into the camera myself. So with the bench, here is everything. From a distance, if you don't really, set a line down on them, they do look like they all line up as they should. And so I'm very impressed with that, that even though there's a little bit of walking one way or the other, that it actually is not all that apparent, at least to me. Well, what have I done? I've actually sanded the top several times, so it's pretty smooth at this point. And I've rounded over all of the edges to include the vertical edges as well. I had already done the bottom, and I had already done the inserts as far as the trusses in the torsion box. But with that, I went ahead and rounded all 226 holes. Don't know if you're supposed to do that, but hey, no sharp edges, so that's nice. I thought they were going to make finger holds to where this would maybe be a little less awkward to pick up, move, whatever, but I've got these little tiny stubby hands that are really thick. So those things, apparently I have these 5 bench dogs are much larger than 20 millimeters because they don't work. So it is a heavy, awkward box to move around. If I think about it, of course 3/4 ply, I could have went with half, but I had read somewhere, well actually I think the plans did call for 3/4. And I had read somewhere as far as deeper bench dog holes actually are much more effective than the thinner ones, although I know that Mr. Paulk certainly uses 1/2 inch on many of his workbenches as well. So with that being said, I went with the 3/4 on top. I do have 3/4 end pieces though, these end spreaders. So that one and the other are also 3/4. So I figure there's probably a sheet of 3/4 plywood, which is around 67 pounds, depending with AC. I think that's what it comes on to. And then with the side spreaders, or excuse me, the sides and the internal spreaders, and then the bottom, then you've got there easily another 1/2 inch sheet of plywood plus. So because of that, there's another 40 some odd pounds, I believe, 45 pounds. So all in all, without the hardware even, I'm thinking this is probably about 100 pounds or so. With everything removed, and all that, I'll bet you this is 100 pounds. Now, it could be 50 pounds, and I'm just like really physically out of shape. That could certainly be it. I am not discounting that one bit. But I'm going to say it's closer to 100 than it is 50. And even if my fitness is certainly a part of this equation, that it is not the complete equation. So just to show you the ends here, this would be the table saw side. There you can see my 2 hinges, 2 hinge holes there. And with the top on this thing, I believe with the whole bench now becoming a counterweight, that I don't honestly think that these extra hinge holes are necessary in order to get that fulcrum closer to the table saw to prevent tipping. I just don't think that's an issue. I will try it, but I have the holes, and so it's not an issue there. Looking down through, that's a beautiful sight. Didn't have that a couple of weeks ago. Really impressed with these sawhorses. I like the fact that there is storage on both sides, and that as long as I'm not like really pushing and pulling on the box like I was today when I was doing all the routing, that these sawhorses should not walk. Of course, they'll remain spread. Like this one here, I could just tighten that up a little bit. But, so they will remain spread. I think under normal uses, that's not an issue. But it's something I should watch out for just to see if it's an ongoing problem. Other than that, though, I am happy with these. I could afford, if I really, really wanted to, maybe shift everything over just that way. I don't know. I think maybe the 1.5 inch right here. And if I moved that over 1.5 inch, almost where this was riding this, I would get more usable space over here, because that 1.5 inch would translate to 1.5 inch this way, which would then allow me more space in between reaching into the box on the side and this bar, with the table saw in place or even with the bars in place. So that's something that I can play with. Now that would require me really to remove the top. That's not too much of a problem. There are probably 20 screws holding it down. But that's an option if I ever feel I need to. And it would give me the benefit if I slid the table saw that way, I'd have a little bit more table as far as the feed goes, because I did honestly set my miter box up here, just set it on the edge as if it were a total station. Had my table saw here, went to feed something through and realized that my table saw or my miter box was in the way of ripping something based on where the blade was. So I was a little bit mystified by that, but then of course I recalled that other benches that are like a total station have freestanding table saws. They're not actually using this system here. I don't have that luxury. I don't have $1,400 for that kind of a saw. Actually, not even the money, because I know there are other less expensive saws that would allow me to have a stand with the saw just to set the saw up and go. I know Bosch, I think Delta has one. Many of them do, but I can't fit it in that thing because my IOA is only like 22, 23 inches, 24 inches maybe, just because of everything else, trying to store those on one side and then have some decent usable space on that side. So I have a very narrow IOA. Therefore, I can't use the IOA for anything more than a couple of thin barrels, a shop vac, you know, some basic stuff. So there's usable storage, and now this thing. But it is one of those to where I just wouldn't have room for it anyway. So this is the system for me if I want to incorporate my table saw into this, and I do, because I'm looking for that one-person, one-man operation and having that outfeed right on level with the saw. It'll receive anything I send on it. So while it's not a total station, it certainly will do the job there. So just one quick look around. You know, nothing more than you've seen in 100 other videos, but this one's mine. And so I'm pretty pleased because it was, you know, it was only an idea a couple of weeks ago. And now I have one. So very good, very good. That's it. Obviously, this would be the side for the router, and I'll have to wait on that router plate for the router. Or for the router hole to be cut into it. And I do think I want to make an insert that will stay with the tabletop. So if I'm not using a router, I'll actually be able to cover that hole up. Other than that, I think we've got it. As I said this morning, probably won't. There's nothing at this point to update on until I get that router in. All I'll say is, hey, it's been a wonderful journey so far. Almost home. It's a very usable bench at this point. Heavy notwithstanding, I'm really happy with it. So we will just probably catch you on that one last video after the router is all set up and in, and seeing how that goes. All right. Well, and actually there is one thing I can do now. Now that the holes are in, I have to put the table saw on, and then I have to create a jig and do my miter slots. Because the tabletop is low enough to where the saw sits low enough relative to the table, as it should, to where when the miter gauge wants to slip through, it actually hits the tabletop, which is good, because that tells me that I'm pretty dialed in, as I thought I was. I am a little bit, there's a little bit more than daylight, you know, when you lay a flat edge across the table saw to the tabletop. So it is a little bit high. But I'm okay with that. I don't think it's going to cause an issue. And I can always modify those, because I only have 2 screws in now, and I do have to actually go back and drill a couple more holes just to secure those handles more. But I could go and I could shave that ever so slightly and just lower that saw down just a touch if I wanted to dial it in even more. We'll see. You know, it's just something to do. But there we have it. So thank you very much for sticking along with me through this journey. Probably 1 or 2 more videos to go, and we'll be done. Then I'll look to the next project, whatever that is. Okay, y'all take care.